I used to sort of say, yeah, everybody should be forced to read Proust or something. Obviously, now I think that's completely demented. I think it's a mistake, actually, to say to 16-year-olds, you should read Middlemarch or you should read Far from the Madding Crowd or something. You should meet people halfway. And I think possibly, in schools, it's important to give people books that will, above all, that will stimulate their imagination and make them excited about turning the pages. I think that's an absolute key thing to it. I think a lot of children's books are brilliant, but I think there's a lot of rubbish out there, actually.
Now, across the year, adults in Britain now spend more time reading social media than books, even though surveys show they enjoy books far more. That's why the Sunday Times Get Britain Reading campaign is urging people to pick up a book for just 10 minutes a day. Although overall reading has declined, book clubs are booming, proving reading can be social too, while platforms like BookTalk and Bookstagram are inspiring younger audiences to share what they love. And now there's a new podcast, The Book Club, from Times columnist Dominic Sandbrook and his producer from the rest of history, Tabitha Surratt, exploring the themes behind some of the world's greatest books. And Dominic joins me now. Hello, Dominic.
Afternoon, Hugo. Lovely to talk to you.
Lovely to talk to you as always. I mean, so far. Look, what is it about a book club, sharing your thoughts about a book, that people find so enjoyable?
I think the funny thing about books is that it's a very intimate, personal thing, reading a book, because you read it individually. It's not like other forms of entertainment that you consume collectively. You sit in your little corner of your living room, or you sit on the train, or whatever it might be, or you curl up in bed reading the book. But then human beings are social animals, and we love to share. So I think there's a particular joy that people find in coming together to talk about what they made of a book. And I think what makes books different from, let's say, history or politics is that there's obviously no right answer. Nobody can pretend to have the absolute truth about whether a book is any good or not, or which characters they like. So the conversation is more open-ended. It's more democratic in that sense. You can chat about a book, you can hear other people's views, you can say, well, I liked Hamnet, or I liked East of Eden, or, The Hound of the Baskervilles, or whatever, but you didn't, and that's fine. And you talk things through, you see other people's viewpoints, all of that kind of thing. And so there's something, I think book clubs tick two boxes. I think the act of reading is one of the best things that you can do as an individual, because, of course, it opens up worlds, it allows you to escape. But coming together to talk about books is a fun, collective thing to do, in which the stakes aren't terribly high, but you can get an enormous amount of pleasure from it.
And do you have a goal in each of your episodes? Are you trying to determine collectively whether a book is worth reading? Are you trying to decide whether it's good, or are you just trying to get stuck in?
Yeah. Excellent question. So it would be bonkers to do book club episodes about books that we both thought were bad, because effectively
it might be fun, but I see what you mean.
You could get away with one maybe as a joke, but you'd be recommending books to the audience that you are saying this book is terrible. So at the end of each episode, so basically the way it works is that we discuss the context for a book. We talk about the author, what they were trying to do. So our very first episode, which came out yesterday, was about Wuthering Heights, perfectly timed for the film. And we talked about Emily Bronte growing up in Yorkshire, the kind of weird world of her childhood imagination and so on, the sort of dark passions that she's bringing out in Wuthering Heights. And then we talk about the book itself and how it works, what we like, what we don't like. We have a kind of a fun gimmick, which is we mark each book out of 10. And we compare our marks, and obviously we're quite different. So I'm, in my 50s, I'm a middle-aged man. Tabby's in her late 20s. She's a young woman. So obviously we're approaching it from slightly different angles, which is part of the fun of it. And then we basically say to the listeners, well, what would you give it? And each book we have a different scale. So Wuthering Heights, we marked in dead dogs. And I think we'll do other books in different registers. So dead dogs, weirdly, there's a lot of dead dogs in Wuthering Heights, the book, but none in the film. Why would you cut them out?
Why would you leave out that, particularly if you're Emerald Fennel? That is odd.
Right,
look,
exactly.
So, having heard your Wuthering Heights episode, which I enjoyed enormously, I wish to sound a note of alarm, which is that I have not read Wuthering Heights, and having enjoyed your podcast so much, I now kind of feel like I don't have to.
Brilliant. That's perfect.
Is it though?
There's two kinds of listeners we want. We want A, listeners who read all the books and are very keen and do all the homework. It's like having any form of club, right? You've got people who do the homework, and then people like you, Hugo, the freeloaders, who turn up and they haven't done the work, but we've done it for you.
Yep.
And you can go to, I see you as somebody who spends a lot of time at very, very sophisticated dinner parties.
Well, thank you.
Showing off your knowledge of books.
Let's pretend,
and
yes.
And you can now go, when you go to your next dinner party on Saturday, you can say to people, Wuthering Heights, well, of course, the book, and then you can come out with a few facts that you've learned from the episode episode and a few important, incisive, critical insights and pass them off as your own. And people will think you're tremendously impressive. So everybody wins. We win, you win. The person who's talking to you thinks she's had the most wonderful evening. So it's a woman, by the way, you're talking to, just to be clear. So it's all good. Everybody comes out ahead.
Let's not go into whether or not I may or may not have literally done that already.
Right.
Look, tell me some other books you're going to be discussing.
So we are doing, next week, we're doing Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing The Great Gatsby. We're doing Hamnet. We are doing The Hound of the Baskervilles. We're doing Normal People by Sally Rooney. So your Times colleague James Marriott is a massive fan of Sally Rooney. So he will definitely be listening to that episode. And what we're trying to do is we're alternating. So each week we have a sort of bona fide, Inglit kind of classic. So like your 1984s or Frankenstein. And then the next week, we'll do something more contemporary and ideally shorter, which will give us time to read it. So Dementedly, right now, I'm reading a book. I don't know if you're familiar with this book, Hugo. It's called A Court of Thorns and Roses.
No, I'm not.
By Sarah J. Maas. It's probably the best-selling single book of the last 10 years. It's a romantasy book. So romantasy, obviously massively popular with teenagers and people in their, generally young women in their 20s.
I'm hearing from my producer that it's filth.
Yeah, do you know what? That's been oversold to me. I'm about 300 pages in, and it's pretty pristine so
really?
far. There are hints of passion and sort of teenage lust, but they're never really built on. So I'm a little bit disappointed so far. Maybe it's just the world. Tabby, my co-presenter, tells me that this is just the world building stage, and that eventually I will get into the filth. So I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, we're doing that. But then you see, we're doing that, and then the following week, I think we're doing The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins.
Oh, amazing.
So it's quite a sort of a tonal shift week by week.
I mean, some of that list you gave us: Never Let Me Go, The Great Gatsby, The Secret History. I mean, that's three of my favourite books right there. I think that's
brilliant.
It's going to be these are ones I won't even have to pretend that I know what you're talking about when I listen to them. What about like much newer formats, audiobooks, graphic novels? Does this count as reading in your view?
Excellent question. Graphic novels, I would say yes. So a graphic novel like, do you read graphic novels?
Not really. No, I mean not really. No, I don't. But I'm not against them. It just hasn't happened.
So there's a bloke called Alan Moore who in the 80s did these graphic novels like Watchmen or V for Vendetta.
Sure.
That I think are excellent. I think they're really, really good, and I think that is reading. It's stimulating your imagination. I mean, of course, the illustrator is doing a little bit of the work for you, which I think is slightly different. But I mean, Dickens had an illustrator, for example. Sherlock Holmes stories had illustrators, so we shouldn't be snobbish about illustrations. Audiobooks, I think, is slightly different because it's more passive. So being read to it's adjacent to reading, I guess. Well, that's why we read to our children. But it's not quite, you're not quite working out intellectually, I would say, if you're being read to as much as you are when you're actually reading. But I'm not dissing audiobooks at all. I mean, I think a lot of people do consume the great works of literature through audiobooks.
Yeah, okay. No, I mean, I agree. I think that will be considered controversial by many, although I agree with it wholeheartedly. Look, reading among 8 to 18-year-olds has dropped to its lowest level in 15 years. You have young children yourself. How are you getting them into reading?
You just ban the devices. Straightforward.
You phone in the washing machine. Done.
Well, you just basically phone in the washing machine. You can only use your. You said. My son does read a lot. On the other hand, he also does own an awful lot of games consoles, and I think the rule that we have is you can only use them after 5 o'clock, and until then, and he's a keen reader because he's seen us reading. I think you set the tone as a parent yourself. I think you just have to be strict about it's very easy to just say, oh, just give them the iPad. I think you just have to be a bit strict about that. And also, I think I've actually changed my mind about reading for especially teenagers. So I used to be, because my sort of carefully contrived persona is very reactionary, I used to sort of say, yeah, everybody should be forced to read Proust or something. Obviously now I think that's completely demented. I think it's a mistake actually to say to 16-year-olds, you should read Middlemarch or you should read Far from the Madding Crowd or something. You should meet people halfway. And I think possibly, in schools, it's important to give people books that will, above all, that will stimulate their imagination and make them excited about turning the pages. I think that's an absolute key thing to it. I think a lot of children's books are brilliant, but I think there's a lot of rubbish out there, actually. And if you're just reading, I mean, I hate to say it, but if you're just reading David Walliams all the time, then I don't think that massively stimulates your imagination. I don't think it opens up new worlds. I don't think it's terribly exciting. I think there's much better stuff out there. So it's about picking the good stuff as much as anything else.
You know, one of my proudest moments as a parent was when one of my teenage daughters was reading a picture of Dorian Gray in the back of the car and was heard to exclaim, "This is amazing. Why aren't people talking about it on TikTok?" And I thought, I've achieved everything I have to achieve as a parent.
But you know what? People are talking about these things on TikTok now because of this BookTok phenomenon.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
So, you know, I think there's still a market there. I mean, maybe it's a small self-selecting group, but I think there is still a market there for really, really good stuff.
Well, look, I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of your series, having enjoyed the first one so much. Thank you so much, Dominic Sandbrook.
Thank you.
And the book club is available on YouTube and on all podcast platforms right now. Thank you, Dominic.